You know that feeling, right? You've had one of those days where you are just completely, totally wiped out, but the idea of eating? Ugh, it's the last thing on your mind. Well, turns out that's not just a weird quirk. It's actually a powerful signal from deep inside your brain, and we're about to find out exactly what it's trying to tell us.
I mean, think about it. You just pulled an all-nighter, maybe for work, maybe for a project. Your body should be screaming for fuel, for calories, for anything. But instead, nothing. Your stomach is silent. The thought of a meal is actually kind of gross. So, what is going on there?
Well, for people on the front lines, doctors, nurses, the ones pulling those absolutely brutal 24-hour shifts, this isn't just some occasional weird feeling. It's a full-blown, dangerous roller coaster of eating habits that can have really serious impacts on their health.
So, how do we get to the bottom of this mystery? Well, a really fascinating study just came out that gives us this incredible window into what's actually happening inside our bodies during these marathon work sessions.
Okay, so researchers in Turkey did something really clever. They took 500 healthcare workers and basically became their food shadows for 3 days straight. They tracked everything they ate on a normal day before a shift, during the crazy 24-hour shift itself, and then on that all-important recovery day right after. Now, here is where it starts to get weird. You'd probably think that being that busy, that stressed, would mean they'd eat less, right? Nope. Turns out, during that 24-hour shift, these workers were actually eating more. They were packing in more energy just to keep going. And to put a number on it, we're talking about an average of almost 2,400 calories. That is a serious amount of fuel. But it makes sense, right? They needed it just to stay on their feet and make life-or-death decisions.
But then, we get to the day after the shift, the day you'd think their bodies would be desperate to refuel and recover. And this is where the whole thing just goes off the rails. Their eating habits didn't just change, they completely fell off a cliff.
Their calorie intake absolutely cratered, dropping all the way down to just 1,750 calories. That's a drop of more than 600 calories from the day before. They were basically running on fumes, right when their bodies needed to repair themselves the most.
And this chart, well, this chart tells the whole story, doesn't it? You see that normal intake before the shift, then bam, a huge spike during the shift itself, and then just a nosedive on that recovery day. It's a nutritional whiplash.
And listen, it wasn't just about the total number of calories. The intake of absolutely essential nutrients also just plummeted. We're talking things like calcium. On that post-shift day, they were only getting about half of what they needed. And their fiber and folate levels were way down too.
So, what is going on? What's the trigger? What kind of biological switch makes someone eat more when they're stressed and working, but then completely kills their appetite when they're exhausted? Well, the answer isn't in your stomach. It's way deeper. It's in your brain.
All right, let's meet the main character in this whole drama, a chemical called orexin. The best way to think about orexin is as the brain's master on switch. It's made in a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, and it has this fascinating 2-for-1 job. It's in charge of keeping you awake, and it's in charge of making you want to eat.
The logic here is actually beautifully simple. When your brain is flooded with orexin, you feel alert, you feel awake, and you feel hungry. It is the ultimate go-go-go signal. But when those orexin levels drop, the exact opposite happens. You get sleepy, and your appetite just vanishes.
Okay, so now we have all the clues. We have the data from the study, and we know about this master switch, orexin. So let's put the pieces together and finally solve the mystery of the post-shift appetite crash.
So, here's how it all plays out step by step. That intense 24-hour shift starts, right? The brain's #1 priority is simple: stay awake at all costs. To do that, it just floods the system with orexin. This keeps the worker alert, but it also fires up their hunger signals. That's why they ate more. But then the shift ends. The body is absolutely desperate for sleep. So the orexin system basically hits the emergency brake and the levels just plummet. The result? That overwhelming wave of sleepiness and a completely suppressed appetite.
So that work hangover, that feeling of being completely wiped, it's not just you being tired. It is a real, physical, biological event. Your brain is prioritizing sleep so heavily that it literally shuts off your drive to eat. All of it, orchestrated by the rise and fall of this one incredibly powerful chemical.
Okay, so we've cracked the code. But, so what? Why does this really matter? Well, understanding this whole mechanism is actually crucial, not just for shift workers, but for pretty much anyone who pushes their body to the absolute limit. First,
This shows us a really critical moment of weakness. The very same day our bodies are screaming for nutrients to recover is the day we are biologically wired not to eat. And that puts people at serious risk for deficiencies in things like calcium, fiber, and folate. But bigger picture, it highlights this fundamental mismatch. Our ancient brain chemistry, which was designed for a totally different world, just isn't built to handle the demands of our modern 24/7 work culture.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The study's authors said it perfectly themselves. We have to get smarter about this. This isn't some issue of willpower or just eating better. It's biology. And we need to find ways to support our bodies when they're in this vulnerable recovery state.
And all this leaves us with a really big, challenging question. We have designed a world, a society that literally never sleeps, but we are trying to run it with brains that desperately need to. The question for all of us now is, how do we fix that? How do we bridge that enormous gap between our modern demands and our ancient biology? Because figuring that out might be one of the most important health challenges of our time.